Hello, everybody. My name is Dimitris, and welcome to this introduction training session on the business model of cooling as a service applied to solar-powered cold rooms within the project of your virtual cold chain assistant. So, as you already know, this project is led by the nonprofit I work for, the Basel Agency for Sustainable Energy, in collaboration with EMPA, and has been funded by several funders who are our strong partners within this initiative. So, as you already know as well, your virtual cold chain assistant relies on three core pillars. The first one is on the tailoring of cooling as a service, the business model of cooling as a service to the agricultural sector. The second pillar is on the design of a digital software called or application called Cultivate, which together with the business model of cooling as a service is aimed to optimize cold room operations, but as well the connection between the smallholder farmers and the buyers. And finally, as well, a very strong pillar on capacity building to train the different stakeholders on this opportunity of cooling as a service applied to solar-powered cold rooms. So, this session, as I mentioned, is focused on the business model of cooling as a service. So let's jump right into the topic. This business model is not new. It's a business model actually that is a mega trend happening across several sectors, and within the sector of energy or energy consumption. It has been existing since many, many years. One typical example is, for instance, with solar panels, whereby customers pay for the consumption of energy produced by solar panels instead of owning the solar panels, and companies deploy those services and charge the customers per kilowatt of energy consumed, and they are responsible for the maintenance, the design, and the deployment of those assets for the customers. And we took that principle and applied it within the sector of cooling to really enable customers to lower barriers of access to clean and energy efficient cooling systems across sectors. Now, a few words of why we started to do this is because the cooling market is really drastically growing across geographies. So some of the figures that were shared from the report of the IEA, the Future of Cooling report back in 2018, was that cooling demand is set to triple by 2050 from 10 to 30%. Now, this, of course, represents a very interesting investment opportunity of 6.9 trillion US dollars over the next 30 years. But also what we see is that customers engage with systems that are typically two-thirds less energy efficient than the best energy efficient systems they have access to in their respective markets. And this, even though of the following fact that the upfront investment cost of such systems is just a very small fraction compared to the total cost of ownership of the assets within, let's say, 12 years, which typically are, we can say even 90% of them are related to the operation and maintenance of the cooling assets. So the purchase cost is actually a very small fraction of it. However, the purchase cost is a very strong driver for customers to buy a technology over another one. And so what we see is that customers, in order to engage on certain technologies, there are strong barriers that are really recurrent across geographies. The first one is the higher upfront cost of efficient technologies. So customers are really reluctant to pay more for a system that looks to be more efficient or is mentioned to be more efficient on paper. So there is really this lack of trust in performance. But also customers don't know the maintenance and repair costs of new technology. So there is also this fear factor there of engaging with systems that are more expensive. Also with the fear that therefore the inspection or the maintenance would be more complicated and more expensive. And finally, as well, customers have ongoing investments into their day-to-day operations. This can happen with a hotel, but as well farmers. and any type of customers that are engaging with cooling systems. And therefore, there is competing priorities for customers to invest into potentially more expensive cooling systems. So therefore, we saw a strong opportunity in cooling as a service. So what is cooling as a service is really a shift from a CapEx model to an OpEx, whereby the customer really simply pays for the amount of cooling consumed. And in the case of cold rooms, this is reflected by a smallholder farmer paying for a crate stored into a solar-powered cold room. And so there is a specific price associated to a crate, which is a certain number of kilos of produce that is stored daily into the cold room. And the purpose of it is that the cold room extends the shelf life of the crop. So what we're targeting here, what the entrepreneurs on the ground who are launching solar-powered cold rooms target, is for smallholder farmers to reduce their crop spoilage thanks to refrigeration, and of course to connect them to buyers. The connection to buyers can be challenging, especially if buyers maybe are not passing nearby the cold room. And here, really, this is also the purpose of the software developed within EOVCCA, is to connect the buyers directly to the smallholder farmers through the cold room, through a marketplace, a digital marketplace. But we have other sessions dedicated to the software solution. So Cultivate is doing many more things than that, and I will not deep dive into this. However, here, a few words on what are the benefits of cooling as a service for EOVCCA. First, it's really allowing for smallholder farmers to easily access sustainable cooling solutions. Secondly, it allows for cooling companies to run the operations of the cold rooms more efficiently. Why? Because they are really into the full ownership of the cold room, and therefore, the more efficient they run the operations of the cold room, the higher will be their profit margins. Thirdly, it really allows for local communities to be positively affected by increased cold room availability. And finally, the last point is really a combination between cooling as a service and Cultivate. Financiers really benefit from digitalization of cold room operations. So they really have there the benefit of having transparency on what are the how profitable are the operations of entrepreneurs running cold rooms on the ground. And therefore, really, the goal is to unlock further investments for those entrepreneurs to be able to scale those cold rooms. But also, it allows for financiers to have a visual on the smallholder farmers and their own profile as to receive financial services. So, but deploying cooling as a service for solar-powered cold room is not only about knowing that you have to access smallholder farmers and they will pay a certain amount for storing their crops into the cold room. A lot of analysis has to be done to be sure that you select the right location, the right technology for the deployment of the cold room. So that's why here we separated them into four main categories. First is really to understand the landscape of the smallholder farmers you will be serving in the area that you will be deploying the cold room. So what are the crops that are being grown in the region? What is the percentage of waste that smallholder farmers are facing? And what are the challenges that they have? Who are the buyers of those crops? And what are other solutions on the ground as well that are already existing that you could collaborate with potentially? So passive cooling, storage, or other solutions. Secondly, you really have to choose a system that fits your purpose on the ground. So this either you are your own manufacturer of those cold rooms, or you are purchasing those cold rooms from a supplier. And at that point, you really have to pay attention to the efficiency of that cold room, to what are the energy storage solutions of that cold room, what is the total cost of ownership within 10, 15 years of that cold room, what are some import costs or challenges that you may face, and also what is already the IoT deployed within that cold room. Thirdly, you have to know what are the logistics challenges in the region that you are deploying the cold room. So what is the road infrastructure? What are some ongoing or future investments happening in that sector? What are the logistic companies present on the ground? And finally, who are the financiers that are interested to support such activities? Once you have this kind of overview, then you can provide some of those inputs into the pricing model that we've developed for cooling as a service. And we have actually, together with my colleague Pablo, several training sessions where we're deep diving into this pricing model that we designed for you, where you can really provide those various parameters of deploying a cold room into a specific region and seeing how profitable is the business. Is it profitable? Is it a good idea to deploy the cold room, and so on? So we have two pricing models. One which is what we call the standardized basic pricing model, and then one more advanced pricing model. And we have training sessions for each available for you. So videos going through each of the tabs of these pricing models. And then the last step into deploying cooling as a service for solar powered cold room is, and I mentioned it earlier, really having an idea of what are the funding opportunities there. We see currently in the countries that we have launched activities, several options. We have grants that are available. So a lot of philanthropies are interested into this sector and want to support the unlocking the deployment of those solutions. There are also venture capitals that support entrepreneurs on the ground and impact funds. We have had interactions with traditional banks, and some of them really want to engage, but they need to have more data to have transparency on how the business are performing on the ground. And in general, it is true that traditional banks are interested into funding larger projects. And it can be a challenge for them to finance new business models and especially startups. And finally, we hope actually to unlock blended finance for entrepreneurs on the ground, to be able to have access to a mix between grants and debt to accelerate the deployment of their activities on the ground. So the good news is that there are many companies actually starting to deploy these activities in several countries, and we've covered some of those stories within case studies. So here you have a case study of the company called Cold Hubs that is active in Nigeria. I won't run in detail through the information here on this slide, but you can actually access the case study on the website listed here at the bottom. And there are some other case studies available as well in that on that website. What is currently our latest developments within UVCCA? So we are actually now developing further tools to be able to integrate cold chain logistics within UVCCA, so within the app called Cultivate. Secondly, we are looking to improve market linkage between the smallholder farmers and the buyers. And there really the goal is to create a marketplace to have as little as possible friction between the buyer and the smallholder farmers through the cold rooms. And finally, we are also integrating digital payments, again, to limit as much as possible the friction between the buyer and the smallholder farmers, and to increase as much as possible transparency as well, and for the smallholder farmers to know exactly how much profit they are earning, and that they can use this type of information as well to gain financial services. And similarly as well, as the same argument as well for the cold room operators to gain further financial services with cost interest rates which have an interesting level, so not too high interest rates. So this here ends this introduction training session to cooling as a service. If you have more questions related to the business model, please don't hesitate to reach out. Of course, do review all of the following videos that are dedicated to the pricing model. And we also invite you to actually join the Global Servitization for Energy Transition Alliance that is really purely dedicated to the business model of as a service deployed to cooling, but also beyond cooling. So with this, I'd like to thank for your attention and good luck for the training.